Howdy folks, it is Nick from Venture Minis. Last weekend I managed to score 3rd at the Kill Team Grand Tournament at Adepticon. I'm really beyond pleased about it. I was just trying to get 10th, so 3rd is amazing. I'll be talking about my experience with the con, going through each matchup, and giving some tips for playing at tournaments. As usual, time codes are at the bottom, so please skip around. First things first, the con was just a blast. This was my first Adepticon ever, and the environment was just so cool. As you can see, the cosplayers were just amazing, and the amount of work people put into the various displays and booths that were there were just so cool. Played a couple of different games. I tried the skirmish game called Sergeants that was interesting. One of the 40k teams tournament teams had this giant punch bowl diorama thing. It was like actual punch. They were coming up with a cup. It was just so cool. I also picked up this Border Worlds Ranger from Victoria Miniatures, which I'm going to use in my Gonskos army. I'm really excited to have him along. And the Golden Demon entries were all just unbelievable. I mean, look at that Tau suit shooting at the dreadnought with the water splash. Listen, I paint for the tabletop. This was so cool. A really big inspiration. Plus, everyone is just so cool there. Talking with everyone at the booths, all the people at the Kill Team tournament. Everyone was just so cool. Excited about the hobby. Excited to be playing games. Super professional. It was probably one of the best tournaments that I've been to. With that said, let's get into the tournament itself. So it was 7 rounds. The first 4, which was day 1, were all on open boards. And the last 3 games on day 2, the Sunday, were all on Into the Dark. It rotated across the Critical Ops pack cards. So you started on Loot. Second game was then Secure. And then it was Capture. It was interesting because on day 1, the last game was back to Loot. But then on day 2, we played Loot, Secure, and Capture. So there were 3 loots throughout the weekend, which as Vet Guard, I was so very excited to find out. It ended up not mattering too much, since my first 2 loot games were against players who were new to the game, and then my last loot was against a Phobos player who was really good, so it didn't work out as much as I was hoping, but we made it work. So for the first game, this was against Wyrmblade. Again, this was on Loot. This was against a pretty new player. This is often how these first games at tournaments can go, is that they haven't split everyone up into the brackets yet fully. This is sort of determining, hey, are you going to be in the top bracket? Are you going to be in the bottom bracket? And so these games, you can often be put against one of the newer players. He put a lot of his guys out in the open. First turning point, I took some guys out with Blast and essentially tabled the Wyrmblade team. It was an easy 20 victory points, but I think coming out of that game, the biggest thing was making sure that he felt like it was, not going to be like this the whole tournament. My first games were actually at a tournament, and I lost all my games at that tournament just because I was learning how to play. They're a great place how to learn how to play because everyone is hopefully going to be really kind to you because they understand that, hey, if you're going to be losing all your games, you're going to be giving people victory points. And so sort of in return for that, people are generally going to be nice to you and help you, learn the game more. That was my experience when I first played, and so I tried to extend that to him as well, and he was a really good sport. Not much tactical advice to give from this. It was a pretty straightforward strategy. It was loot. I threw my guardsmen out onto the objectives, scored, and then tried to kill his guys. Maxed out on primary, maxed out on my secondaries. I took hold them back, stand fast, and center control, so maxed out 20 victory points. Note that 20 meaning 18 plus 2 from painted. Game 2 was much more interesting. This was Secure versus Gellarpox. Now, Gellarpox was the thing that I was most scared about this weekend besides Hand of the Archon. I've never played against Gellarpox before this game because I just haven't had any players who played them in my area. That being said, knowing that I was going to face them, I spent a lot of time reading about them, learning about them, and so I had a pretty strong game plan going in. My strategy going into this game was I needed to kill at least 2 Hulks, but I didn't need to kill any more than that. Otherwise, I just needed to deal with the little guys. Because we're playing on Secure, I can make sure that I have enough bodies to be able to fan out and deal with all the objectives. If there's only 2 Hulks remaining, they can't go and deal with the other objectives, so I need to be able to deal with the little guys who can. Knowing this, I did not take the plasma gun. This was a controversial decision, I know. Everyone asked me after the game, yeah, so you killed them with the plasma gun, right? In fact, no. The Melta, the Demolition Vet, and the Plasma Pistol were the only things that I needed to deal with the Hulks. My sniper took some shots, but it wasn't what was bringing them up to speed. Instead of the plasma gun, I took the Flamer. The Flamer was able to deal with a good portion of the little guys in the middle. Because he spaced so well, I was not able to get a big torrent off, but that's okay because it forced him to space in such a way that he was not able to take a lot of ground with them early on, and so I could really focus on those aggressive Hulks first, and then keep flicking at the little guys so that eventually I just had an open board. In the first turn, he moved up the big guy with the Flamer right into the middle to do a big attack on 3 of my guys. I was hoping for this because what it meant was that I had my Melta on Engage, who could then use In-Death Atonement and do a giant attack against the Hulk. I was rerolling 1s from Take Aim, and so I was able to really guarantee that I was going to get a good attack here. The Melta died, he used In-Death Atonement, he brought the Hulk probably down to I think 5 runes, and then my Sergeant proceeded to charge. With that charge, he did the guaranteed damage he needed to do with the Power Sword, and as such, killed 1 Hulk. So that was 1 Hulk down. Then I proceeded to be able to deal with the other Hulk that I needed to with the Plasma Pistol and the Demo Mine. While all of that was going on, I was putting pressure out around the board with my troopers up in that northwestern point. I had a trooper go run up with the into the breach, so he got within 1 inch of the scramble over pile, and then he scrambled over onto the objective. So putting pressure out everywhere as much as I could while ensuring that I had my main damage secured to deal with either A, the Hulks, or B, with the other glitchlings. I did a recon dash with my sniper up onto the southern vantage point, which allowed me to have my sniper deal with the glitchlings. I know it was really tempting for me to shoot at the Hulks with the sniper. I did that once and found out that, hey, this wasn't going to really deal with the Hulks, but this was going to deal with the glitchlings. And so I was able to deal with most of the little guys by comboing with my Flamer, with my grenade launcher, and with the sniper. With Stand Fast, Secure Ground, and Central Control, I was able to score 19 victory points. I can't remember if it was the final Central Control or if it was the final Secure Ground, but I think overall 19 victory points, beyond happy. He was a great Gellarpox player. I think it was really just that big Flamer move at the beginning. It was a big gamble, but with In-Death Atonement, it wasn't as useful as it otherwise would have been. I think this is the match that I'm most proud of this weekend, just because going in, I knew this was going to be hard, and I managed to pull it through. Next up was my loss against Breachers. This guy, Adrian, is a really amazing player, came over from the East Coast. He played really meticulously and really well because of it. I think we were each taking too much time in our turns because, we both have a lot of models. It was a really, really a chessy matchup. Both of us were, pretty good players at this point, and so we were really going in with, hey, we need each move to matter. We also had some moments where we were talking about obscuring and some various mechanics, which we had to bring over a TO about. And so by the end, the last 2 turning points, we had to really speed through. And I play really poorly when I have to rush my turns. And so it was really just all a downfall from the point when I was like, oh, we have to just rush and play as fast as we can. Really amazing plays by Adrian. That was just one of the best players there. So I learned a lot from that game, I think was the big thing. Because he was positioning so well to avoid my damage, I needed to position more aggressively, not in a way that would get me killed, but in a way that posed more threats. And so going into my rematch with him in the final game, I think that's where it really worked out. Capture specifically is really rough against Breachers. I think Vetguard versus Breachers, Breachers are in the advantage, especially on Capture, because on Capture, the Vetguard APL stuff doesn't really matter here. You need to have bodies sitting on the points, and with Breachers who want to be up close, it really benefits them. My biggest weakness here was hold them back. I think that TAC op is not very good, but I took it here just out of, hey, maybe I can do this. It was not at all what I needed to be taking there, and was definitely, I think my TAC ops were the big fault for this game. Last game of the day was against Custodes on loot. It was pretty steamroll at this point. Loot versus Custodes, I just have the bodies to be able to do all of the mission actions that I need to. I don't really have to deal with the Custodes. I can just sort of free shoot at them with my plasma, my Melta, and all my gunners, and just take them down. I do not think Custodes are as good as the LVO made them look. I think they're probably really good on Into the Dark for certain missions against certain matchups, but on open boards, Custodes really are not in a place where they're doing a lot of work. Maybe against elite teams, but definitely Vetguard just gets to roll over Custodes. I woke up for day 2 to find myself playing Phobos, and I think I went in with a bit of overconfidence. I was like, hey, Phobos, that's a team that I should probably be able to beat, right? And it was the closest game of the whole weekend. We each were neck and neck the entire game. There was just 1 or 2 rolls that really mattered. Frankly, we both agreed that actually the game came down to the final initiative roll. The middle further point on the Phobos side of the board had a victory point left on it to loot. And it was either A, I go run up, get it, and then I score Glory and Death as well as the 1 victory point, which means that I win with 1 victory point, or the Phobos grabs it, denies me 2 victory points, and gets 1, thus winning. It was all down to that roll, and the Phobos won that roll. I had already used my chronometer reroll on a previous roll, which did matter. Like, I think it was important that I use the chronometer there, but I would have liked to have 2 chronometers, which you can't have, but oh well. It was a great game. It was really honored to play against him. I think that board specifically made it tricky for me as Vetguard to score well. I couldn't really leverage going into his half of the board at all. There was a mine on the right side, and I didn't position my guys so that I had bodies to be able to just run through the mine and tank it. So ultimately, I was really fighting for the middle and left sides of the board, which, with the Phobos numbers, really puts it in the Phobos' favor. Frankly, I think it was attack ops that put me in a bad spot here too on this loss. I think Glory and Death was a bad choice because it means I needed to guarantee that I could have more victory points, but because he was just such a good player, he was able to really know, hey, here's the victory points. I know I'm going to be able to at least tie, which I think is what he did. I think he tied on primary, and then we got tac ops and tac ops. I didn't score enough. That was simply as is. I should have taken Secure Hatchway instead of Glory and Death, and I definitely should not have taken Hold Them Back. I don't know why I took Hold Them Back. It was just a stupid choice. Overall, super good game. It was such a pleasure to play against him. Tomas is a great player, and he has a YouTube channel too, which you can probably find through the Instagram, which I have up in the top right, so go follow him there. He's got some great painted models too. My second to last game was against Legionary, which was also a really pleasant game. Day 2, I didn't have a single game where I felt like the skill levels were weird. Like, it felt like we were really all playing our best, which felt amazing. She went with all Nurgle, had the Butcher, as well as the usual suspects for the Legionary team. I've played against Legionaries and Intercessors more than any other team, so I'm really comfortable with the matchup at this point. And so going into this game, it was pretty much, hey, this is a clockwork kind of scenario. On the left side, we traded. They ran in with the mage and managed to knock out 2 to 3 of my guys, and then I proceeded to trade back out. And so it was really just doing even trades as much as possible while securing as many objectives as I could. I managed to hold on to 4 objectives for a long time despite doing these trades. So they weren't able to come in and really gain much from these trades. All the while, I had a really great set of tac ops. Central Control and Secure Hatchway were just perfect for that middle left area. And I knew that I could score stand fast easy. So it was a good 20 victory points coming out of this game. Felt really good for that final game. I think the biggest thing against Legionaries or Intercessors on Into the Dark is making sure that we are pushing out and applying pressure as much as possible while not losing too much in the process. For example, you can see that trooper in that big hallway. His whole purpose was to go up and put pressure on that back objective point. And while he died trying to do that, it put pressure off of my other areas where I was able to get the 4 objectives that I needed. I didn't need that back objective, but by applying pressure there, it allowed me to alleviate pressure on the other points, since Legionaries only have 6 models. The last game was a rematch against the same Breachers player, Adrian, who's, again, one of the best players there. I really enjoyed playing this game again. Coming back in, I knew how Adrian played, and so I tried to apply pressure in ways that would ensure that, hey, at least maybe I can go even. My goal here was to go even. Luckily, I had a really lucky number of rolls throughout this game. On the right side, he put the shield up through the wall, and my Melta managed to one-shot the shield, and from there, because of how tightly we were both playing, having just one model, such a big model as the shield, go down, meant that I was able to apply pressure and take over the board and eventually win. Again, I think this final game was really down to rolls. I think we were both playing evenly as possible, but it was just getting those 6s and him rolling misses was what did it. Plus, this time, I think I took the tack ups that I needed to, that I was able to actually score. Securing the hatchway in the middle, plus central control, meant that I could just control that central area without having to worry about much else. Plus, taking stand fast allowed me to score as much as I could. That back left point on his side, I knew I could get to in the first turning point because of move. This would allow me with my into the breach. That's 3 inches from into the breach, plus 1 inch from moving, plus a 6-inch move, plus a dash. That would allow me to get across the board over onto that objective and sit there. And with my 14 models, it means I knew I could do that as the last action of the turning point. Additionally, I had my sniper spotter looking into that whole room, and so I basically could guarantee that I could take out anyone who's getting onto that point, and then also put one of my guys on it. So this allowed me to guarantee that, hey, I'd at least score stand fast once, and from there I was able to hopefully be able to score. But hey, it worked out. 20 victory points, and overall, this is better than I could expect. This left me with a result of 2 losses and 5 wins, with most of those wins being 20 victory points, only one of those wins being a 19 victory point game, and then my 2 losses were not sub 10. I had 12 and 14 victory points respectively on those losses, which is the kind of thing that you need to be able to get into that top bracket. So luckily, yeah, it put me into 3rd place. I was tied with victory points overall for the person who was actually the 1st place. He had a better overall results for his games. He, I don't think, lost a single game. But in terms of victory points, tied that. And then was able to definitely have more victory points than the 4th and 5th players, who both had a 5-2 result. So what are my big tips and tricks and takeaways from this tournament? I think the big thing is, 1, stay healthy throughout the weekend. It's a long weekend. The first day, after the 3rd game, my brain was just gone, and I'm really glad that I got to fight the Custodes player and not a big Horde team after that, because I don't know if I would have been able to cognitively make it happen. I didn't eat enough during the weekend. I think that's a big thing, is make sure you have a lunch. Make sure to bring a lunch. The on-site stuff is fine, but not the kind of stuff I want to be eating when I'm stressed and tired and playing Kill Team. Hydrate, for sure. I brought my own water bottle, and that was huge. And make sure to get fresh air. Go outside in between matches. It's really refreshing, especially because it's a cold Illinois day in what is effectively still winter because of the seasons in the Midwest. And so it's nice and cold. You can get that fresh air and then come back in refreshed. Another big tip is socialize. Everyone there is so cool. Walk in and say hello to someone. And then if you don't chat with them, say hello to someone else. Everyone there is there to play Kill Team and talk about Kill Team. Everyone's excited about Kill Team. And they're probably wanting to talk about the game with you. So that's my big recommendation. Just go up to someone and say, hey, introduce yourself. Ask about what team they're playing is the best opening question to ask. And then just chat. That being said, pause during the day. Before the games is a great time to talk with people. Especially during the lunch break too is a great time to talk with people. But in between matches, make sure to just take a second to rest your voice. My voice is still messed up from the weekend just because you talk for the whole day. Like 8 hours, you are dictating your moves, talking through the intent of what you're doing, and it's so loud in there that you have to talk loudly. So be sure to rest your voice too. My third tip is think about the boards before you get to them. When you show up on the first day, you get your packet, and so you know what the boards are going to be sort of like, at least in terms of objectives. And so you can really think about, hey, once you have your matchup, start thinking about what your game plan is. That goes into know your win condition, know what you're looking to do to get 20 victory points. Usually in a game of Kill Team, just in a casual sort of sense, you're not trying to get 20 victory points, you're trying to win the game. But at a tournament, your goal is 20 victory points no matter what. It's not about winning necessarily, right? Like, what you're trying to do is get 20 victory points. That's how you win a tournament. You could both score 20 victory points, theoretically, if the mission allowed for it, and you'd still be in a good position for winning. That being said, you do want a W on your record because that's how it works in terms of matchups, but a win plus 20 victory points is way better than a win plus 10 victory points. So think about your tac ops, think about your matchup, think about, hey, how do I do the first turning point to ensure that I'm scoring 4 victory points out the gate? Or, if you're an elite team, knowing how you can leverage the first turning point to be able to score 4 for the next 2 turning points. And lastly, ask questions. Everyone there should know their team well enough to be able to answer any question you have about their team. So ask. You don't have to go in knowing everything about everyone else's team. You just need to be able to ask the questions that you need to be able to know the things about the other team. So, ask things like, do you have any people who can shoot out of conceal? Do you have any silent weapons? What are the big tricks of your team? Everyone should be willing to answer those questions. Anytime I go into a game, I go, hey, do you know about Vet Guard? Do you know about the Demolition Vet? Do you know about In-Death Atonement? And make sure that people know what they're going into. Because the best games of Kill Team are not the ones where you trick people. The best games of Kill Team are the ones where you get to say, hey, we both understand the game, now let's play our best. Some brief addendums to my guide on Vet Guard. I've been basically taking the rosary on my Sergeant every game now. I think the Sergeant is way more valuable as a shooter than I really gave him credit, and so the rosary usually goes on him. For medics, I've been taking the medic against teams where I know I need to shoot a lot, but I've been taking the hardened on objectives where I know I need to have a guy sitting there. So for example, on capture, I've been taking the hardened vet, but in other scenarios, I might take the medic. I think I took the medic maybe twice during this tournament, maybe 3 times, and the other times, most of the time, I was taking the hardened vet. Hey, but that's about it. That was my 3rd place at Adepticon. Really excited about that result. Thank you all for watching this video here. Be sure to ask any questions you got in the comments. I am always happy to answer them. Also, you can find me on Instagram at VentrueMinis, and you can also give me a coffee for making these videos. I always appreciate it. Got my first donation. That really is kind of fun. But yeah, just doing these for fun. I hope you have a good day, and see you next time.